is there someone circulating a mic, or should we just...
I'm asking this as a parent. What would you advise, both of you, if one of my kids would like to go on March of the Living this year? How should we confront with all these things that are happening? Is there a possibility to go there? Should we think about other places like Ponar, or Andy, you can give me some advice maybe? Or what would be your, it's not your classical field, I know, but what would be your advice? How can we confront with history? How can we remain clean with that? And how can we make a very positive discussion, or even a constructive discussion with the Poles about the past? How can we contribute to that? Thanks.
Well, let me try and, I guess you're asking the question in light of the debate going on now in Poland and so on. Look, I think on one level, if you're talking about physical safety or security of your kid, I wouldn't worry. The challenge, though, is, again, the larger context in this debate. Now, maybe there's something positive here, because I think the nature of the March of the Living program is to use Poland as a backdrop. I mean, the goal is taking our kids to visit the sites of Jewish death and martyrdom, and understanding what took place, and then often literally, figuratively going to Israel to see what that means. I don't know that framework changes, but there have been efforts in more recent years to try to connect Jewish kids on these programs, Israeli kids on these programs, with Polish kids, which I think, if anything, is probably more important today than it was. And again, a kind of challenge to political leaders in Poland. So already there are efforts in these March of the Living programs to make them more, how shall I say, three-dimensional than they were at the beginning. They're not exclusively focused on Poland. Yes, you can go to Pinar, and look, you can have some of the same challenging discussions in Lithuania that you have in Poland. So, look, I hope, if anything, what's taking place is more of an argument to do more of this, not to do less of it.
I've got a very short question to Mr. Dimitrakopoulos. Excuse me for the pronunciation. I read carefully your reports, and always states that the rise of anti-Semitism is what Jewish communities say, but I haven't seen a statement that you actually acknowledge the rise of anti-Semitism. Do you think that the next report we could read an acknowledgement that the EU agency actually acknowledges itself that there is a rise of anti-Semitism, and not only that Jewish communities are reporting it?
I'm not fully convinced, I'll be quite honest with you, as to whether the point is to make a political statement that there is a rise or that there is a drop in anti-Semitism. If you look at reports from CRIF, from France, if you look at reports from the United Kingdom, you will see that whether there is a rise or whether there is a drop is not the issue. The issue is whether there is anti-Semitism or whether there is not anti-Semitism. For us, as an agency that applies scientific methodology, to simply use a political statement and say there is more anti-Semitism, there is more racism, there is more anti-Roma discrimination, without having the type of evidence that can support this, would be wrong, because it would diminish our own credibility. So that's why what we are saying is that there is evidence of anti-Semitism everywhere. We find this in the official and unofficial data which is available, and then we go out and we ask Jewish people themselves to tell us what the situation is. The survey, which was run until now, does not allow us to speak about a rise, because one survey cannot provide you with trends or with an analysis of how it compares to the previous situation. But as I said, we are now conducting a second wave of the survey, And when we have the results at the end of this year, we will be able to see how they measure against the results that we had before.
I think we have time for one last question.
Good evening. Oh.
Can you use the microphone and perhaps slow down a bit so we could all understand what you're asking?
Not go to planes with a report to hotels. And now very important. In Ukrainian, with three situations, glorification who is killed Jewish in Holocaust, before Holocaust, and have from new name street, change street, who is killed Jewish in Holocaust. When it is pogroms, many streets, new in Ukrainians, monument who is killed Jewish. Many Jews in Ukraine, in Austria, in Berlin, not street Hitler. In Ukraine, have many streets who is killer leaders, pogroms, killers Jews, murdered Jews. In Ukraine, political glorification.
I'm sorry, we have to ask for a specific question or move on. So thank you very much for your contribution. And if there are no other questions,
There is one.
There is one over there.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm Sergio Della Pergola of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I want to thank Ioannis for the leadership he gives to the survey of 2012 and the new survey of 2018. I'm one of the group of investigators who carried out the early survey and will be involved in the new one. So in fact, the time perspective that you mentioned will be now available from the point of view of perceptions from the inside of the Jewish community. But I wanted to add that there are other sources of data, namely, for example, a survey that was conducted in between the two FRA surveys by one organization, the Anti-Defamation League. Without entering into the details of accuracy, when you compare the results of one source, which speaks of perceptions among the general public, and the FRA survey, which speaks of perceptions within the Jewish population, the results comparing countries are very, very consistent, which means that one, in a sense, reinforces the other and also gives you greater confidence that what you are doing is on the right path. I only would like to mention that the early FRA survey, and this will be the case in the next one, produced a real mine of valuable data. There is a huge, valuable database that has not been exploited enough. The final report that FRA published was excellent, was synthetic, very fair, but there is a lot more that can be done. And I would encourage users and communities to take advantage of this very rich database, which allows you to go much more into the depth, for example, about the dimensions of anti-Semitism, notably denial of Shoah, anti-Israeliness, and the old kind of protocols of the elders about the supposed Jewish superpower and physical recognition of the Jews, sort of, and also the political matrices of the perpetrators, be they from the left, from the right, from a Muslim background or a Christian background, and several other very important elements which can be examined country by country, and then on the whole for the European Union. So please, let's not do the mistake of collecting data and then putting them in the drawer, but let's use them because they provide the necessary background for policies and assessment and action, which in fact at the end is what we would like to achieve. And thanks again to Ioannis for the leadership he produces. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Sergio. I think we have a dream team that will produce very good results. There's one thing I wanted to say which I didn't mention in my speech, and it came to me when you spoke about the participation of our young children in events on commemoration. Recently, there was an event in my own city of birth, Thessaloniki in Greece, and for the first time since the Second World War, a public official, quite well known, the mayor of the city, Mr. Boutaris, stood up and actually spoke and acknowledged what happened in the Second World War, what happened when thousands, tens of thousands of Thessaloniki Jews were taken to concentration camps. He didn't speak about this, though. He spoke about the indifference of the rest of the population. He spoke how the memory had not been respected, had not been kept, and he actually urged that this changes. I want to note this, and I want this to become known because the speech was in Greek. To my knowledge, it has not been translated, but it was a really very moving speech that really made the headlines in my own country.
I think that's a worthwhile note to conclude this panel. As you've seen, we have moved from this morning from the realm of scholarship, direct scholarship, into policy on a very granular level, both in terms of the panelists. I thank all for their contributions, Rabbi Baker, Andy, Ioannis, Dina, Mr. Kern as well, as the impassioned remarks from the floor in certain cases, including relating to Ukraine and other places. And we have seen that what begins in the academy has an impact in our real world time. And I think that's one of the themes of this conference and one of the attempts that we are trying to bring together in this room. So thank you very much for your participation. And to remind you to please fill out the questionnaire. If you don't get lunch, I'm told. Is that correct, Armin? No. But anyway, lunch is waiting whether you fill it out or not. Thank you very much.